as an industry, people in the events industry, and it is a broad church, right? And we've got a cross-section here, but if you think about the wider events industry, family and ecosystem, I mean, it's vast, it affects so many different areas. And I think so many people have had their lives turned upside down because of just the complete sort of stop and cessation of activity on any kind of event, whether it's weddings, private meetings, right up to large-scale conferences, concerts, and so on and so forth. So I think we've got to this point where we realise we can't take anything for granted, and we've got to continually look for what's next, what's new, what's the evolution. How do you take, you got a client you were just talking about there that says, actually, we want to stick with virtual, but where do they go from that? Because after a while, virtual's going to become really crowded, and everyone's going to be doing their version of a virtual event. And how do you then innovate when they're all doing similar kinds of things? How do you get that cut through when there's no sort of, what's the right words to use, but there's no premium for access in a way. Anyone can register, anyone can choose to watch it. Some people can engage, some people don't. But in some ways, once you've got this vast audience, you potentially have another graph going the other way around engagement. So how do you make sure that you give that value? So I think what's going to be interesting for me is how these two things coexist with each other, because I think a couple of things are certain. Live events are going to have to be better, because people, if they are going to make the trouble and the journey to go to that physical space, when they go there, they're going to want to get a lot of value out of it, which is good because delegates will be motivated, exhibitors will be, we've all been to bad shows where exhibitors sit behind their desk all day drinking coffee, wondering why nobody comes and talks to them, right? Those shows and those days are going to go. The actual experience that the live event will have to deliver will have to be much more engaging. And equally, I think the virtual accompaniment, which does do exactly what you said, which is it expands and extends the life of your event. You've got the pre, the post, you've got the enriched content, you've got the behind the scenes, you've got all of the stuff you would associate with, large scale sporting events when you watch the highlights package or the whatever it might be. You've got all of those things to think about. And so what I think is interesting for me is how organizations will look for the blend. And the value that I think we will all place in those opportunities when we can physically be in that same space together. But instead of it just being, 3 days a year, once a year, and that's it, how does the combination of digital content and real life event, either the one big showcase or a series of smaller showcases, how does that all blend together to create a much more enriched experience for the client, for the visitor, for the sponsor, commercial partner, and so on. I always said at the beginning of this, right, if I was an organizer, if I had IP or I was a publisher, I'd be really excited about this pandemic because it's going to make me do all of the stuff that I'd never got around to doing because it was just too easy every year to turn up and do a show. Now I've actually got to think about it, and I've got to probably your design team that you were talking about, all the great stuff that you've been doing down in town. You've got to start thinking about how you assemble all of these assets. And the one thing as a venue is, and this isn't true for all venues, but certainly for us, we don't have IP in the sense of our own content. We don't organise our own shows. Some do, some don't. We don't. But I think if I had that IP or that publishing or that magazine or that website, I'd be going absolutely bananas now with all of the stuff that I think I could do, because all of a sudden, virtual seminars, video content, it's become de rigueur, it's become mainstream. And I think we haven't quite worked it out yet, but there's immense audience and commercial opportunities that are yet to be fully exploited. And that I think is really exciting. But it will always, for my money, it will always be underpinned by these big showcase gatherings, these big showcase happenings when people can physically get together.